I gripped my leather portfolio tighter as I stepped through the gleaming glass doors of Horizon Digital Solutions. The security guard glanced up, his expression neutral as he handed me a visitor badge with "New Hire Orientation" printed in bold letters. If only he knew what kind of orientation today would really be. "Conference room is on the 30th floor," he said, gesturing toward the elevators. "They're expecting you." The elevator doors closed with a soft whoosh, and for a moment, I stood alone with my reflection. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have recognized the woman staring back at me. Emily Parker, 2. 0. Hair styled in a sharp bob instead of the long waves Nathan had always preferred. Charcoal power suit instead of the soft pastels he'd insisted suited my personality, and eyes that no longer held any trace of the devastation I'd felt when my world imploded. My heartbeat quickened as the elevator climbed, not from nervousness, but anticipation. I thought about Nathan, probably sitting in his corner office right now, smugly directing his team, completely unaware that, in exactly 45 minutes, everything would change. The elevator chimed as it reached the 30th floor. I stepped out into the bustling hallway of Horizon's headquarters, the place Nathan had called his second home for years, though I now understood it had been merely one of his many stages for deception. As I made my way toward the HR department, I caught fragments of conversation from passing employees. "Did you hear about the all-hands meeting later?" "Something big's happening at 10:30. Parker's been insufferable all week." Perfect. The rumor mill was already churning, creating exactly the atmosphere I'd anticipated. Grace Tompkins, the HR director, greeted me with a knowing smile. She was one of the few who knew my true identity and position. "Emily, welcome to Horizon. Let me get your orientation started." She winked subtly, playing along with our carefully orchestrated plan. As Grace led me through the open office area, I caught sight of him through the glass walls of the break room. Nathan stood commanding attention from his team, his designer suit and perfectly coiffed hair projecting the image of success he'd always prioritized. But I knew better. That Rolex on his wrist and the Italian leather shoes, I was still paying for them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months ago, my life as I knew it ended at our anniversary party. 15 years of marriage celebrated in our beautifully decorated backyard, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and family. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the string, lights draped through the maple trees to the custom playlist that included every meaningful song from our relationship. Nathan had seemed distracted that evening, constantly checking his phone and disappearing for important work calls. I'd made excuses for him to our guests, as I'd done countless times before. "Emily," a voice pulled me from my memories. Nathan was approaching, that familiar confident smirk playing across his lips. I straightened my spine, maintaining perfect composure. "Well, what a surprise," he said, resting his palm against the wall beside me in that proprietary way he used to establish dominance. "Finally decided to enter the tech world?" "Nathan," I replied coolly, noticing how his wedding band had been replaced by a flashier, more expensive one. "I didn't expect to see you here." "It's Director Parker in the office," he corrected, straightening his silk tie. "I head the client relations division. And you." He glanced at my temporary badge, his smirk widening. "Are in orientation." Well, everyone has to start somewhere. Nearby employees pretended not to listen, but their typing had suspiciously slowed. I smiled politely, letting him savor what he believed was his moment of superiority. The wall clock showed 9:45 a.m. In Sao. Exactly 45 minutes, everything would change. "I'm looking forward to the all-hands meeting," I said casually. "I hear there are some interesting announcements planned." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Perfect. let him wonder. New hires don't typically attend executive meetings, he said, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone I'd endured for years. Exceptions can be made, Grace interjected, appearing at my side. In fact, Emily needs to head up now. The board is waiting. Nathan's eyebrows furrowed slightly. The board? Don't worry, Nathan, I said, gathering my portfolio. Everything will make sense very soon. As I walked toward the executive conference room, I could feel his eyes following me. The weight of my real employee badge, the one announcing me as Chief Security Officer, felt satisfying in my blazer pocket. In my portfolio lay the documentation of every security vulnerability in Horizon's client systems that Nathan's department had overlooked or actively hidden, every compliance regulation they'd skirted, every data protection protocol they'd compromised to make sales targets. The board had been quite interested in my detailed analysis of these vulnerabilities, particularly given my unique insight into the man running the client relations division. They'd been even more impressed by my proposals for strengthening Horizon's security infrastructure and my track record of implementing cutting-edge protection systems at my previous firm. The summit conference room doors loomed ahead, and through the glass, I could see Richard Harmon and the other board members assembling. They nodded respectfully as I approached. Behind me, I heard Nathan's expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. He'd followed, curiosity apparently getting the better of him. After you, Director Parker. I gestured to the door, my voice carrying a hint of authority that made him pause. The next 30 minutes would change everything. The carefully constructed facade Nathan had built would crumble, just as he'd once shattered my world. But unlike him, I wasn't here for destruction. I was here to rebuild not just my life, but an entire security system that had suffered under his careless leadership. As we settled into the conference room, my mind drifted to that devastating night 6 months ago. The memory was crystal clear, standing in our kitchen after all the anniversary party guests had left, staring at bank statements and credit card bills I'd never seen before, listening to Nathan explain how he'd invested in his future, future that apparently included my friend Olivia, and a condo I was unknowingly paying for. Richard Harmon's voice snapped me back to the present. Before we begin, I believe we have some introductions to make. He smiled warmly in my direction. Ms. Parker, would you like to do the honors? I stood, smoothing my blazer with steady hands. The fear and helplessness I'd felt that night in the kitchen had been replaced by a calm certainty. Nathan sat across from me, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization as I pulled out my real employee badge. Thank you, Chairman Harmon. For those who don't know me, I'm Emily Parker, your new Chief Security Officer, and we have some serious vulnerabilities to discuss. The sharp intake of breath from Nathan's direction was just the beginning. The real work, transforming Horizon's security protocols into something worth being proud of, was about to begin. The atmosphere in the conference room brought me back to that warm June evening 6 months ago. The night my world imploded. Our anniversary party had ended, the last guests drifting away around midnight, leaving behind empty champagne flutes and the lingering notes of our wedding song. I'd been clearing dishes, still wearing my blue silk dress, when my phone buzzed with a notification from our joint credit card account. The purchase alert showed a $12,000 charge at Cartier made that very afternoon, while Nathan had been supposedly stuck at the office preparing for a client presentation. I frowned, thinking it must be fraud. Nathan appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, and I held up my phone. Someone's gotten hold of our credit card. There's a huge charge from Cartier today. His expression flickered, just momentarily, before he composed himself. Oh, that. It was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary. You weren't supposed to see the notification. I might have believed him, if not for the text that came through at that exact moment. From Olivia Wilson, with a photo. of her hand adorned with a platinum and diamond bracelet. The message read, "Thank you for the perfect anniversary gift. Can't wait until it's not a secret anymore. Olivia, my friend for nearly a decade, the same woman who'd been at our party just hours before, hugging me, complimenting my dress, raising a toast to 15 more years, while the bracelet Nathan had bought her was hidden beneath her sleeve." "There's been a mistake," Nathan started, but his phone chimed with another message. When he reached to silence it, I was faster. I grabbed his phone and saw dozens of messages from Olivia. The truth unfolded in devastatingly clear detail. "How long?" I'd asked, my voice unnaturally steady. "Emily, it's not what you think." "How long?" 2 years, he finally admitted. But it wasn't serious until recently. 2 years. Half of our Silicon Valley life. Half of our time in Seattle after the relocation he'd insisted would be good for us. While I'd been rebuilding our social circle, volunteering at the tech literacy program, making our new house a home, he'd been building a parallel life. "There's more," he'd said, almost relieved now that the secret was out. He went to his office and returned with a stack of financial documents. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You should know everything. Those papers revealed the true extent of his betrayal. Nathan had been secretly diverting our funds into crypto investments, luxury purchases, and a condo downtown. The total, $175,000 of hidden spending and debt, much of it leveraged against my excellent credit score. Credit I'd built meticulously after watching my parents struggle financially throughout my childhood. "You'll never recover from this, Emily," he'd said, dropping his wedding ring on the counter with a metallic clink. "You're too cautious, too risk-averse for the tech world. Always have been. That's why I had to handle our finances my way." The memory dissolved as Richard Harmon continued the meeting, gesturing for me to present my findings. I stood, clicking to the first slide of my presentation. The screen displayed a comprehensive map of Horizon's security vulnerabilities, each one meticulously documented, each one tracing back to Nathan's department. "Over the past 6 months," I began, "I conducted a thorough analysis of Horizon's cybersecurity infrastructure. What I found was alarming. 76% of our enterprise clients have inadequate protection against current threat vectors. The most concerning patterns emerge in accounts managed directly by the Client Relations Division." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I continued, clicking to the next slide. "These high-value clients were systematically sold downgraded security packages to inflate profit margins, with documentation altered to suggest they received our premium protection services." The board members leaned forward, examining the evidence with deepening concern. Nathan's face had lost its usual self-assurance, his complexion paling as I methodically dismantled the shortcuts his department had taken. "Ms. Parker," interjected Vivian Zhao, the company's legal counsel, "these discrepancies could expose us to significant liability." "Precisely," I confirmed, "which is why my team has already developed a comprehensive remediation strategy." I distributed folders containing my proposed solutions. Implementation begins immediately. The discussion that followed was intense but productive. Board members asked pointed questions about the security overhaul, while Nathan sat in stunned silence. I answered each query with the expertise I'd developed over 15 years in digital security, experience Nathan had always dismissed as too cautious and behind the curve. Richard Harmon closed his folder decisively. "This is excellent work, Emily. The board fully supports your security initiative." He turned to Nathan. "Director Parker, effective immediately. All client relations protocols will require security clearance from Ms. Parker's team. You'll report directly to her throughout this transition." Nathan's expensive pen snapped between his fingers, sending tiny drops of ink across the table. "This is absurd," he finally sputtered. "I've managed these client relationships for years. You can't possibly expect—" "Your methods have exposed Horizon to significant risk," Richard cut in. "Ms. Parker's appointment isn't up for debate. The board's decision is unanimous." As the meeting adjourned, board members approached to welcome me officially, their handshakes firm and approving. Nathan remained seated, staring at my proposal as if trying to find a loophole, an escape route. "Director Parker," I said, gathering my materials, "I'll need a complete audit of your client security protocols by tomorrow morning. My office, the one at the end of the executive wing, will need your input." He looked up, his face a storm of emotions. "You planned this," he accused quietly. "No, Nathan," I replied, keeping my voice professional but firm. "You planned this the day you decided to compromise client security for sales bonuses. I'm just implementing the solutions." As I left the conference room, Grace fell into step beside me. "Security has been notified," she murmured. "They're implementing your access protocol changes now. Parker's system permissions have already been adjusted." I nodded, watching the office dynamics shift in real time. Employees who had once hurried away from Nathan's approach now stood their ground, their expressions curious rather than fearful. The culture of intimidation he'd cultivated was already beginning to crack. My temporary badge had been replaced with my official credentials. Emily Parker, Chief Security Officer. The weight of it felt right against my blazer, a tangible symbol of transformation. Through the glass walls of what would soon be my office, I could see Nathan roughly gathering his things, his movements angry and jerky. 6 months ago, he'd told me I was too cautious for the tech world, that I would never recover from the financial devastation he'd engineered. He couldn't have been more wrong. "Emily," Olivia's voice came from behind me. I turned to see her standing there, clutching a folder, her face drained of color. 6 months ago, she'd stood in my kitchen after Nathan had moved out, insisting she'd had no idea about the financial deception, that she'd been just as fooled as I was. She'd been wearing the Cartier bracelet then, too, though she'd tried to hide it under her sleeve. I didn't know you worked here now," she stammered. "Chief Security Officer," I corrected her gently, gesturing to my badge. "And you're in administrative support for client relations," she replied. Her voice small. I nodded, noting the irony. At our anniversary party, she'd mocked my outdated understanding of tech while refilling her champagne. Now she was essentially reporting to me. "I have the quarterly compliance reports," she said, holding out the folder. Her hands were trembling, slightly. "Thank you, Olivia. Please also prepare access logs for all client accounts managed by Director Parker in the last 2 years. I'll need them on my desk by end of day." She nodded quickly and turned to leave. "And Olivia?" I called after her. She paused, looking back with apprehension. "The bracelet violates our professional dress code. Please leave it at home tomorrow." As the morning progressed, I settled into my new office, watching the ripple effects of the meeting spread throughout the company. Tyler Reed, a junior security analyst, approached my door cautiously. "Ms. Parker? I have some concerns about the encryption protocols Director Parker implemented for the Westbrook account. The backdoor access points are concerning." "Bring me everything you have," I instructed. "Every vulnerability will be addressed." The fear in Tyler's eyes was familiar. I'd seen it in my own reflections 6 months ago, staring at mounting debt statements and forged signatures. But now that fear was being replaced by something else. Hope for change, for accountability, for a workplace built on integrity rather than intimidation. My phone buzzed with messages from other department heads, all eager to discuss security, upgrades. Nathan's power structure was crumbling, but unlike him, I wasn't interested in building a kingdom of fear. I was here to create something far more valuable. A system of transparency, protection, and genuine security. The transformation had begun, and there would be no going back to the old ways of doing business. The woman Nathan had tried to destroy was now the architect of a new security framework, one built on the very values of caution and thoroughness he had mocked. As I looked out over Seattle's skyline from my office window, I thought about the night after I'd discovered Nathan's betrayal. After he'd left with his suitcases and cutting remarks, I'd sat at our dining room table until dawn, surrounded by evidence of his deception. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not be broken by this. Instead, I would use everything I'd learned about security, about vulnerability, about human nature, to build something stronger. 6 months of intensive work had followed. I'd contacted Maya Chen, my friend from graduate school who specialized in digital forensics. Together, we'd traced every aspect of Nathan's financial manipulations and discovered the parallels to his professional shortcuts. I'd reached out to Dr. Diane Foster, the renowned security expert whose methods Nathan had always dismissed as too conservative. She'd become my mentor, helping me translate my personal experience with betrayal into professional expertise in vulnerability assessment. The most surprising alliance had come from Richard Harmon himself. After I'd presented my findings about Horizon's security vulnerabilities, identified through careful examination of their public-facing systems, he'd recognized not just the problems I'd uncovered, but the solutions I offered. "Your experience gives you a unique perspective," he'd said during our final interview. "You understand that security isn't just about technology. It's about people, trust, and systematic protection." Now, watching the activity in the office, below, I could see that perspective already reshaping Horizon's culture. The $175,000 debt Nathan had left me with had become an investment in my future, though not in the way he'd intended. It had forced me to recognize vulnerabilities, to build stronger boundaries, and to transform betrayal into expertise. Grace appeared at my door with another update. "The security team is assembled in Conference Room B, ready for your briefing. And Emily," she added with a small smile, "everyone's talking about how things are finally going to change around here." I gathered my materials and headed toward the conference room. The morning's confrontation with Nathan had been necessary, but it was just the beginning. The real work, building a truly secure foundation for Horizon's future, was just beginning. As I passed Nathan's former office, I saw him sitting alone, staring at his screen, his kingdom of deception crumbling around him. Our eyes met briefly through the glass, and I saw something I never expected: recognition. Not just of my new position, but of the strength he'd always underestimated. I continued walking, my steps purposeful. The woman he'd dismissed as too cautious was now leading the very transformation his recklessness had made necessary. There was a certain poetry to it, a justice more satisfying than any revenge could have been. The security team rose as I entered the conference room, eager to begin the work of building something better. I opened my portfolio and took a deep breath. "Let's get started," I said. "We have vulnerabilities to address." During those devastating days after Nathan's betrayal, I'd found myself in a fog of shock and disbelief. The financial revelations had been particularly crushing. I'd always prided myself on being prudent with money, a trait born from watching my parents' financial struggles. And yet somehow, Nathan had managed to accumulate $175,000 in hidden debt using my credit, all while mocking my caution. The night after he left, I'd sat frozen at our kitchen island, surrounded by financial statements that told a story of calculated deception. Credit cards I'd never seen, loan applications with my forged signature, transfers from our retirement, accounts to crypto wallets, a second mortgage on our house. Each document revealed another layer of violation. At 2 a.m., when sleep seemed impossible, I'd called Maya Chen, my closest friend from graduate school and a digital forensics specialist. "I'm coming over," she'd said immediately, not waiting for details. Don't touch anything else. Don't sign anything. By dawn, Maya had arrived, armed with her laptop and a determination that cut through my haze of shock. She took one look at the scattered papers and her expression hardened. This isn't just financial infidelity, Emily. This is fraud. The next week, Maya practically moved in. Together, we traced every transaction, documented every forgery, and built a comprehensive picture of Nathan's deception. Her expertise in digital security and fraud detection proved invaluable, especially when we discovered that Nathan's personal financial schemes mirrored concerning patterns in Horizon's client accounts. He's using the same techniques professionally, Maya had noted, examining public information about Horizon's security practices. Cutting corners, hiding vulnerabilities, prioritizing speed over safety. Classic risk displacement. That observation had been the spark that ignited my transformation. I began to see Nathan's betrayal not just as a personal wound, but as a case study in security vulnerability. The very skills I'd developed throughout my career, identifying weaknesses, tracing exploitations, implementing protections, could be applied to my own situation. I'd contacted Dr. Diane Foster, the renowned security expert whose methodology Nathan had repeatedly dismissed as too conservative during industry panels. To my surprise, she'd agreed to meet with me immediately. Your husband's behavior follows a classic pattern of security exploitation, Dr. Foster had explained during our first meeting in her university office. Identify vulnerability, exploit trust, maximize gain, discard compromised asset. I see it in corporate espionage cases all the time. With her guidance, I'd begun to reframe my understanding of what had happened, and more importantly, how to respond. This wasn't just about healing from betrayal. It was about implementing a comprehensive security overhaul, both personally and professionally. Horizon Digital Solutions has significant vulnerabilities in their client security protocols, Dr. Foster had noted, reviewing public information about the company. And if your observations about your husband's professional conduct are accurate, those vulnerabilities may be more extensive than they realize. That conversation had marked the beginning of my 6-month journey from devastated spouse to security transformation expert. I'd immersed myself in advanced certifications, working with Dr. Foster to develop cutting-edge protection methodologies. I'd leveraged my existing expertise in digital security while incorporating new insights about human vulnerability factors, insights painfully acquired through personal experience. Meanwhile, Maya had helped me rebuild my financial foundation, meticulously documenting Nathan's fraud and working with creditors to separate my legitimate obligations from his deceptions. The process had been grueling, but each resolved account, each corrected credit report entry, had represented another step toward reclaiming my life. The meeting with Richard Harmon had been the culmination of months of preparation. I'd approached him not as a wronged spouse seeking revenge, but as a security expert offering solutions to vulnerabilities I'd identified in Horizon's systems. Your company has significant exposure in its client protection protocols. I'd told him, presenting my analysis without mentioning my connection to Nathan. I believe I can help address these issues before they result in major breaches. Richard had been impressed by my expertise, but it was only after our second meeting that I'd revealed my full background. I should disclose that I have personal knowledge of Nathan Parker's operating methods, I'd explained calmly. He was my husband until 6 months ago, when I discovered significant financial deceptions that mirror the security vulnerabilities I've identified in your client systems. Rather than dismissing me due to potential bias, Richard had recognized the unique value of my perspective. You understand the threat vector from the inside, he'd observed thoughtfully. That gives you insight others would miss. The irony hadn't been lost on either of us. Nathan's betrayal had given me precisely the expertise Horizon needed to fix the problems his department had created. Now, settling into my new office, I watched through the glass walls as the initial shockwaves from the board meeting rippled through the company. Employees gathered in small clusters, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Nathan stormed past, his face a mask of barely controlled fury as he headed toward his downsized office space. Tyler Reed, a junior security analyst, approached my door hesitantly. "Ms. Parker, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Tyler, come in." He stepped inside, clutching a folder nervously. "I've been trying to raise concerns about our enterprise client security protocols for months, but Director Parker always said I was being paranoid." He placed the folder on my desk. "These are vulnerability assessments I've been conducting in my spare time. The banking sector clients are particularly exposed." I examined his work, noting the methodical analysis and thoughtful remediation suggestions. "This is excellent work, Tyler. Why didn't you take these concerns higher up when Director Parker dismissed them?" Tyler's expression darkened. "The last analyst who tried that was fired for creating unnecessary alarm. Director Parker made sure everyone knew why they were let go." I nodded, understanding the culture of fear Nathan had cultivated. "That stops now. I want you to assemble a team to implement these security enhancements immediately. You'll report directly to me." The transformation in Tyler's demeanor was immediate. His shoulders straightened, his expression brightened with purpose. "Yes, ma'am. I already have people in mind who've been concerned about our vulnerabilities." As Tyler left, my phone buzzed, with messages from other department heads, all suddenly eager to discuss security concerns they'd previously kept quiet. Nathan's wall of intimidation was crumbling, revealing problems that had been festering beneath the surface. Grace appeared at my door with another update. "Emily, we've received 17 internal security reports in the last hour alone. It seems everyone was just waiting for someone to listen." "Set up an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning," I instructed. "It's time to establish a new security culture at Horizon." Through the glass walls, I spotted Olivia hurrying toward the executive wing, her expression anxious as she carried a stack of files. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw the same panicked look she'd had that night in my kitchen, trying to explain away the bracelet while simultaneously claiming she'd had no idea about Nathan's financial deceptions. "I thought he was going to leave. You for me?" she'd sobbed. "He promised we'd be together once he'd secured our future." She'd gestured vaguely at the financial documents spread across my counter. I didn't know he was doing all this. I hadn't believed her then, and I didn't believe her now. The access logs would reveal exactly how much she'd known about Nathan's professional shortcuts, the same way the credit card statements had revealed her complicity in our personal life. But unlike Nathan, I didn't need humiliation to feel vindicated. The transformation of Horizon's security culture would not be built on fear or revenge, but on transparency and integrity. The very values Nathan had mocked as naive would become the foundation of something stronger than he could have built. By late afternoon, my new office had become command central for Horizon's security overhaul. Teams of analysts huddled around whiteboards, mapping vulnerabilities and designing solutions. The energy was palpable, not the frantic stress of Nathan's leadership style, but the focused determination of professionals finally empowered to address long-ignored problems. Maya called, eager for an update. "How's it going, Chief Security Officer Parker?" "It's quite the day," I replied, watching through my office windows as Nathan argued with another executive in the hallway, his gestures becoming increasingly desperate. "The vulnerabilities are worse than we thought, but the talent here is impressive. They just needed permission to do their jobs properly." "And our friend Nathan?" "Currently experiencing the consequences of his actions, both personal and professional." I watched as Richard intercepted the argument, directing Nathan back to his office with a firm hand on his shoulder. "It's not about revenge, Maya. It's about rebuilding something better." "I know," she said softly. "That's why you're going to succeed where he failed." He never understood that true security isn't built on shortcuts and intimidation. As the sun began to set over Seattle, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I took a moment to absorb the magnitude of the day's events. 6 months ago, I'd stood in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of Nathan's betrayal, feeling as though my carefully constructed world had been irreparably shattered. Now I stood in my office at Horizon, surrounded by dedicated professionals, working to implement the security vision I'd developed, a vision born directly from that painful experience. The $175,000 debt that Nathan had thought would destroy me had instead become the catalyst for a transformation he could never have anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Foster. Saw the announcement about your appointment. Horizon's gain is the industry's gain. This is how real change happens, not despite our wounds, but because of what we learn from them. As the office began to empty for the evening, Nathan appeared in my doorway, his earlier fury now replaced with a cold calculation I recognized all too well. "Impressive performance today," he said, leaning against the doorframe with forced casualness. "But the board will eventually realize that real client relationships can't be managed by someone so risk-averse. Some corners need to be cut to stay competitive." I regarded him calmly, noting how quickly he'd reverted to the same justifications he'd used for his financial deceptions. "That philosophy is exactly why I'm here, Nathan. Security isn't about cutting corners. It's about building foundations that can withstand pressure. Something you never understood." His artificial smile faltered. "You won't last a quarter in this position. Tech moves too fast for your cautious approach." "We'll see," I replied simply. "The audit of your client accounts is already underway. I suggest you prepare your explanations carefully." He straightened, the pretense of civility evaporating. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." "On that, we agree completely," I said, turning back to my work. "This is just the beginning." As Nathan stalked away, I looked out, over the Seattle skyline, now dotted with the lights of other buildings coming alive against the darkening sky. The woman Nathan had dismissed as too cautious was now leading a security revolution at the very company where he'd built his reputation on risky shortcuts. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the responsibility. This wasn't just about proving Nathan wrong or reclaiming my professional standing. It was about transforming a company culture, protecting vulnerable clients, and building something that would outlast both Nathan's deceptions and my own personal vindication. My phone buzzed again. Tyler sending the first batch of security upgrades for approval. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, I allowed myself to acknowledge how far I'd come. The cautious woman who had once been so easily dismissed had become exactly what Horizon needed. A leader who understood that true security comes not from fearless risk-taking, but from careful, methodical protection of what matters most. The transformation of Horizon Digital Solutions began in earnest the following morning. I arrived at 6:30 a.m., well before most employees, to prepare for the all-hands meeting that would set the tone for everything to come. The quiet of the empty office gave me time to collect my thoughts as I reviewed my presentation one final time. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched Seattle come alive beneath me. Ferries crossing the Sound, lights flickering on in neighboring buildings, the first rays of sunrise glinting off the glass and steel of the city I'd made my home. This view had once been Nathan's alone, a symbol of the professional success he'd lorded over me. Now it represented something entirely different, a vantage point from which to implement real change. By 8:45, the large conference center was filling, with employees from every department. I stood near the entrance, greeting people as they arrived, noting the mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. These were professionals who had worked under Nathan's leadership style for years, a culture of cutting corners, taking shortcuts, and silencing concerns. Today would mark the beginning of a fundamental shift. "Big crowd," Richard commented, appearing at my side. "Word has spread about yesterday's board meeting." "Good," I replied, Transparency starts now. At precisely 9 hours, Richard introduced me to the assembled staff, many of whom were seeing me for the first time. As I took the podium, I caught sight of Nathan slipping into the back of the room, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes burned with barely contained anger. "Good morning," I began. "For those who don't know me yet, I'm Emily Parker, your new Chief Security Officer. I'm here because Horizon has a security problem, not just in our systems, but in our culture." The room fell silent as I clicked to my first slide, displaying a comprehensive map of the company's security vulnerabilities. "What you're seeing is the current state of our client protection framework. Over the past 6 months, I've conducted a thorough assessment of Horizon's security infrastructure, and what I found was alarming. Systematic downgrading of security protocols, bypassed compliance requirements, and critical vulnerabilities left unaddressed." Murmurs rippled through the audience as employees recognized the systems they worked with daily. I continued, moving through the presentation methodically, explaining not just what was wrong, but how we would fix it. "This isn't about placing blame," I emphasized, though I noticed several glances directed toward Nathan in the back row. "This is about acknowledging where we are so we can build something better. Starting today, every department will implement new security protocols designed to protect both our clients and our company." I outlined the transformation roadmap: enhanced encryption standards, rigorous penetration testing, comprehensive audit trails, and most importantly, a new culture of security awareness where concerns could be raised without fear of retaliation. "The changes won't be easy," I acknowledged. "They'll require additional steps, more thorough documentation, and initially, more time. But they will make us stronger, more trustworthy, and ultimately more successful." As the presentation concluded, I opened the floor for questions. The first came from a young developer in the front row. "These new protocols will slow down our deployment schedule," he pointed out. "How do we explain that to clients who are used to our current pace?" It was exactly the kind of question Nathan would have used to dismiss security concerns in the past. "By being honest," I replied simply. "We tell them we're implementing enhanced security measures to better protect their data and systems. We explain that the additional time represents value, not delay. In my experience, clients appreciate knowing their security is being taken seriously." More hands rose, and I addressed each question directly and transparently. Throughout the discussion, I noticed Tyler Reed moving through the crowd with several other analysts, answering technical questions and offering support to concerned team members. The seeds of a new security culture were already beginning to take root. From the back of the room, Nathan finally spoke up, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. "These measures may sound good in theory, but we operate in a competitive marketplace. Our clients choose us for our agility and quick implementation. Won't these extensive security protocols put us at a serious market disadvantage?" The room quieted, all eyes turning from Nathan to me. It was a challenge meant to undermine me publicly. Classic Nathan strategy. "That's an excellent question, Director Parker," I responded calmly. "And it highlights exactly the false dichotomy that has created our current vulnerabilities. Security and efficiency aren't opposing forces. They're complementary when implemented correctly." I clicked to a slide I'd prepared specifically for this objection, displaying performance metrics from my previous implementations. These are results from security overhauls I've led at other companies. Initial slowdown during implementation, yes, but look at the 3-month and 6-month markers. Improved client retention. Reduced emergency patching, higher client satisfaction scores, and most tellingly, increased referral business from existing clients who value and trust our approach. Nathan's expression remained skeptical, but I noticed several department heads nodding thoughtfully. "We're not choosing between security and business success," I concluded. We're recognizing that in today's landscape, real success isn't possible without robust security. Our clients deserve no less, and neither does Horizon. As the meeting adjourned, employees approached with additional questions and concerns. The energy was noticeably different, not the reluctant compliance of Nathan's regime, but genuine engagement with the path forward. Through the crowd, I spotted Olivia hanging back, her expression unreadable as she observed the scene. Grace appeared at my side, handing me a folder. "The access logs you requested," she murmured. "Olivia compiled them this morning. And Emily, there are some concerning patterns you should review immediately." Back in my office, I spread the logs across my desk, quickly identifying what had concerned Grace. Client access patterns showed systematic security downgrades coinciding with sales bonuses. The timestamps and authorization codes revealed Nathan's direct involvement. But there was more. Olivia's user credentials appeared repeatedly in the approval chain. "She knew," I muttered, thinking back to her tearful denials in my kitchen. Just like with the credit cards. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. Olivia stood in the doorway, her usual confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, though I hadn't summoned her. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I was just reviewing these access logs. Your credentials appear frequently in the security downgrade approvals." She sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. "Nathan had me use his login sometimes. He said it was standard procedure when he was traveling." "These aren't his credentials," I replied evenly. "They're yours, specifically authorized under your name and access key." Olivia's facade cracked slightly. "He said everyone did it, that the security protocols were just bureaucratic hurdles that slowed down the sales process. The same way he said the credit card charges were just temporary, that the loans in my name were just investment vehicles." I kept my voice calm, professional. This wasn't personal anymore. It was about establishing accountability. She looked down at her hands, the Cartier bracelet noticeably absent from her wrist. "I didn't understand what was happening, Emily. Not with the finances, not with the client accounts. He made everything sound routine, necessary." "You implemented security downgrades on client systems without proper authorization," I stated. Plainly, that exposed their data to significant vulnerabilities, which could have resulted in breaches affecting thousands of people. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends on you," I replied. "I'm establishing a security ethics committee to review these incidents and determine appropriate responses. Full cooperation and transparency will be considered favorably." Olivia looked up, surprise evident in her expression. She had clearly expected immediate termination, the approach Nathan would have taken. "I'm not interested in punishment for its own sake," I explained. "I'm interested in building a security culture that learns from mistakes and prevents them from recurring. The committee will expect a full accounting of every downgraded system, every bypassed protocol. I'll compile everything," she promised, her relief palpable. "And Emily, I'm sorry, for everything." I nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. "The committee meets on Friday. Have your documentation ready." After Olivia left, I turned my attention to the more extensive security logs, tracing the patterns of vulnerability across Horizon's client portfolio. The scope was even broader than I'd initially assessed, with particularly concerning gaps in financial sector clients' systems. Maya called just as I was documenting a series of particularly egregious protocol violations. "How's day 2 of the security revolution?" she asked. "Illuminating," I replied, describing the patterns emerging from the logs. "It's not just negligence, Maya, it's systematic. Nathan built his entire client relationship strategy on downplaying security to accelerate sales cycles. Classic risk displacement," she noted. "He gets the bonus for quick implementation, while the client carries the hidden risk of compromised security." Exactly. And he created a culture where questioning these practices meant career suicide. I glanced through my office windows at the security team already implementing the first phase of enhancements. But that's changing already. Faster than you expected? Much faster. It's like people were just waiting for permission to do the right thing. After finishing my call with Maya, I spent the afternoon meeting with department heads, outlining the specific security enhancements for each division. Most were receptive, though a few, particularly those who had been closest to Nathan, expressed concerns about implementation timelines and resource allocation. These changes will require additional staffing, pointed out Michael Voss, the development director who had frequently collaborated with Nathan on accelerated implementations. Our current teams are already stretched thin. I've anticipated that, I assured him, sharing the staffing plan I'd developed. The board has approved budget reallocation from the sales bonus structure to security implementation. We're prioritizing protection over premature deployment. By late afternoon, the first tangible changes were already visible throughout the office. The analyst team had set up a security enhancement center in one of the larger conference rooms, creating a hub for implementation support. Screens displayed real-time progress metrics as systems were updated, vulnerabilities patched, and protocols strengthened. Nathan remained noticeably absent from these activities, sequestered in his downsized office where he appeared to be on a continuous string of phone calls. Through the glass walls, I could see his gestures becoming increasingly animated as the day progressed. Richard stopped by my office around 5:30, just as I was reviewing the final implementation reports from the day's activities. "You've made remarkable progress already," he observed, glancing at the metrics displayed on my screen. "The board is impressed with the execution speed." "The groundwork was already laid," I explained. "People knew what needed fixing. They just needed authorization and direction." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "There's something else you should know. Nathan has been contacting clients directly, suggesting that these security enhancements are unnecessary and will only delay their project timelines." I'd anticipated this move. "How are clients responding?" "Mixed reactions. Some are concerned about delays, but most seem to appreciate the transparency about security vulnerabilities that might have affected their systems." He smiled slightly. "Your approach of honesty is already proving effective." "I'll reach out to those clients personally tomorrow," I decided. They deserve to hear directly from me about the enhancements we're implementing on their behalf. As Richard left, I noticed Olivia working late, surrounded by files she appeared to be methodically analyzing. The transformation was affecting everyone, forcing reckonings both professional and personal. In her case, the two were inextricably linked, just as they had been for me. Tyler appeared at my door, his expression bright with purpose. "We've completed the first phase security upgrades for the banking sector clients," he reported. "Preliminary testing shows vulnerability reduction of 78% already. Excellent work," I commended him. "Schedule a client briefing for tomorrow afternoon. They should understand exactly what we've implemented and why." As the office gradually emptied for the evening, I remained at my desk, finalizing the next day's implementation plan. Through the windows, Seattle's skyline glittered against the darkening sky, a constellation of lights reflecting in the sound below. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here, leading a company-wide transformation born from my own painful experience. The ding of the elevator announced a late departure, and I glanced up to see Nathan stepping in, his posture rigid, with suppressed anger. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Beneath the anger, a flicker of uncertainty. For perhaps the first time, he was beginning to realize that his dismissal of my cautious approach had been his most significant miscalculation. The following days unfolded in a carefully orchestrated sequence of implementation, education, and cultural transformation. Each morning began with a briefing for team leaders, outlining the day's security objectives and addressing concerns that had emerged from the previous day's activities. By the end of the first week, the initial resistance had largely dissolved as employees witnessed the positive effects of the enhanced security measures. Client feedback was predominantly positive, especially after my personal outreach explaining the vulnerabilities we'd identified and the protections we were implementing. The Westbrook financial team was particularly appreciative, Tyler reported during our Friday morning briefing. Apparently, they'd experienced unexplained system anomalies that make more sense now that they understand the security gaps. And? How is the team adapting to the new protocols? I asked, looking around at the department representatives gathered in my office. There was some friction initially, admitted Sarah Jenkins from the development team. The additional documentation requirements felt cumbersome, but now that we've integrated them into our workflow, they're becoming second nature. And honestly, it's reassuring to know we're building more secure systems. The only persistent resistance came from Nathan and his closest allies in the client relations department. They continued to frame the security enhancements as unnecessary hurdles that would hamper Horizon's competitive edge. But with each passing day, as more clients expressed appreciation for the increased protection, their arguments lost credibility. Friday afternoon brought the first meeting of the Security Ethics Committee, where Olivia presented her documentation of the downgraded security implementations. To her credit, her report was comprehensive and unflinching, detailing not just the technical violations, but the cultural pressures that had normalized them. Director Parker made it clear that questioning security downgrades would be career-limiting, she explained to the committee. He cited examples of employees who had been sidelined or terminated after raising concerns. The pattern she described matched exactly what I had experienced in our personal life. Nathan creating an environment where questioning his decisions was portrayed as obstructionist or naive. The same manipulative tactics that had kept me in the dark about our finances had been deployed professionally to silence security concerns. After deliberating, the committee decided that Olivia would be placed on probation rather than terminated, with the requirement that she complete advanced security certification and contribute to the development of Horizon's new ethical guidelines. "You're giving me a second chance," she said quietly as we left the meeting room. "I'm giving the company the benefit of your experience," I corrected her. "You understand exactly how these violations occurred and why they were allowed to continue. That insight is valuable for preventing similar situations in the future." The weekend brought my first real opportunity to process everything that had happened since stepping into Horizon's offices on Monday morning. Sitting on the balcony of my Capitol Hill apartment, watching ferries cross the Sound as rain misted softly around me, I reflected on the distance I'd traveled, both literally and figuratively, since that devastating night 6 months ago. Maya joined me for brunch on Sunday, eager to hear the unfiltered version of the week's events. "I still can't believe you pulled this off," she said, raising her mimosa in a toast. "From financial victim to corporate security revolutionary in DR. 6 months. It's literally the most satisfying redemption arc I've ever witnessed firsthand." I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. It wasn't about redemption, though. Not really. It was about taking what I learned from a painful experience and using it to create something better. "Speaking of your ex," Maya said, setting down her glass, "any significant meltdowns this week?" "He's been surprisingly restrained, at least publicly. But Richard mentioned he's been making calls to clients, trying to undermine the security initiative." I shrugged slightly. "It's not working. The vulnerabilities were too real and too significant for clients to ignore once they understood the risks. And Olivia, that must be awkward, her reporting to you now." "It's complex," I admitted. "She's cooperating fully with the security overhaul, documenting every compromised system. I think she genuinely didn't understand the significance of what she was doing, both personally and professionally. Just like she didn't understand she was sleeping with your husband and spending your money?" Maya raised a skeptical eyebrow. "The situations are parallel," I acknowledged. Nathan has a particular talent for normalizing unethical behavior, making it seem like the doubts are the problem, not the actions themselves. We spent the rest of brunch discussing the next phases of Horizon's security transformation and my plans for the coming week. As we parted, Maya hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Em. Not just for the professional triumph, but for how you're handling it. With integrity, not vengeance." Her words stayed with me as I prepared for the week ahead, reviewing implementation reports and readying my presentation for Monday's executive committee meeting. This transformation wasn't just about correcting Nathan's professional missteps or proving him wrong about my capabilities. It was about establishing a new standard, one that valued thorough protection over quick profits and genuine security over superficial success. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. As I stepped off the elevator, Grace approached immediately, her expression concerned. "Nathan called an impromptu meeting with the client relations team at 7:30, she informed me quietly. "He's been presenting alternative security implementation plans that would maintain competitive timelines while addressing the most critical vulnerabilities." "On whose authority?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "His own. He's positioning it as a compromise approach to prevent client attrition." I nodded, unsurprised by this attempted end run around the board-approved security overhaul. "Where are they meeting?" Grace led me to conference room C, where Nathan was mid-presentation, displaying slides that cherry-picked elements of my comprehensive security plan while discarding the foundational changes that would provide genuine protection. "This approach gives us the best of both worlds," he was explaining as I entered. "We address the highest-profile vulnerabilities without sacrificing the implementation speed our clients expect." The room fell silent as I approached the front, standing beside the screen where Nathan's diluted security plan was displayed. "This is an interesting proposal, Director Parker," I said calmly, "though I'm curious why it wasn't submitted through the proper channels for security protocol review." Nathan's expression hardened slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "I was simply exploring alternatives that might better serve our clients' needs for both security and efficiency." "I appreciate your concern for efficiency," I replied, "but I'm afraid this approach replicates the exact vulnerabilities that exposed our clients to risk in the first place. It prioritizes quick implementation over comprehensive protection." I turned to address the client relations team directly. "The board has approved our security overhaul precisely because it doesn't compromise on client protection. Partial measures might appear efficient in the short term, but they create future vulnerabilities that ultimately damage both our clients and our reputation." Nathan opened his mouth to object, but I continued smoothly. "I welcome input on implementation methods, of course. If you have suggestions for optimizing our processes without compromising security standards, please submit them through the proper channels. My door is always open for constructive collaboration." With that, I nodded politely and exited, leaving Nathan to deal with the deflation of his attempted workaround. This wouldn't be his last effort to undermine the security transformation, but each attempt only reinforced the necessity of the very changes he was resisting. Back in my office, I found Richard waiting, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I hear Nathan tried an end run this morning," he commented. "Predictable," I replied, setting down my portfolio. "He's still operating from the same playbook." "The board has been monitoring his communications with clients," Richard informed me. "His attempts to undermine the security initiative have crossed into actively misrepresenting company policy. We've scheduled a formal review for Wednesday." I nodded, understanding the implications. Nathan's position was becoming increasingly untenable as his resistance to necessary security measures revealed his prioritization of personal convenience over client protection. "This isn't about personal vindication, Richard," I said carefully. "It's about ensuring Horizon's security culture can evolve beyond the shortcuts and compromises." Of course, he agreed. But accountability is part of that evolution. Nathan's approach to security has exposed our clients to significant risk. That can't continue, regardless of your personal history. As Richard left, I turned to the window, watching rain streak across the glass as clouds gathered over the sound. The storm brewing outside mirrored the one developing within Horizon's walls, a necessary clearing of old, stagnant patterns to make way for something healthier and more sustainable. The transformation was gaining momentum, shifting from implementation to integration as new security protocols became standard practice throughout the company. Nathan's attempts to maintain the old patterns of compromise and corner-cutting only highlighted the necessity of the changes underway. The woman he had dismissed as too cautious was now leading Horizon toward a future where caution wasn't a liability, but a cornerstone of genuine security. And that was a vindication far more meaningful than any personal triumph could have been. By Wednesday morning, the momentum of Horizon's security transformation had become undeniable. The metrics displayed on the large screens in the Security Enhancement Center showed impressive progress. 82% of critical vulnerabilities addressed, client protection protocols upgraded across 76% of accounts, and incident response readiness improved by a factor of 4. But numbers told only part of the story. The real change was evident in the shifting dynamics throughout the company. I arrived early for Nathan's review meeting, taking a moment in the quiet of my office to gather my thoughts. Through the windows, Seattle was emerging from beneath, a blanket of morning fog, the Space Needle appearing and disappearing as mist swirled around it. There was something fitting about this half-revealed view, clarity emerging gradually, just as Horizon's true security landscape was coming into focus after years of deliberate obfuscation. Tyler knocked lightly on my open door, tablet in hand. "The final analysis of the financial sector vulnerabilities is complete," he reported, his confidence growing visibly with each passing day. "We've identified backdoor access points in 17 client systems that weren't documented in any official security protocols. Nathan's special access routes," I noted, scanning the detailed findings, "used for expedited implementations without proper security review." "Exactly. We've closed 14 already, with the remaining 3 scheduled for remediation by end of day." Tyler hesitated slightly. "There's something else you should see." He swiped to a different screen, displaying log data that made my breath catch. The backdoor access points showed repeated entry from IP addresses not associated with Horizon systems, external access that had no legitimate explanation. "Have you traced these?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Tyler nodded grimly. 3 trace back to VPN services commonly used to mask identity, but 4 others. He swiped again, revealing a familiar address. They traced directly to Director Parker's home network. The implications were immediate and severe. This went beyond cutting corners or downplaying security risks. Nathan had been accessing client systems outside of official channels without authorization or documentation. Whether for monitoring, data extraction, or system manipulation, it represented a profound breach of trust and potentially serious legal violations. "Have you shared this with anyone else?" I asked. "No, ma'am. I came directly to you." "Good. Download everything to a secure drive and lock down these findings for now. We'll address this in the review meeting." As Tyler left, I sat back, in my chair, processing this development. 6 months ago, I'd discovered Nathan had been living a double life personally, hiding financial deceptions behind a facade of success. Now it appeared his professional deceptions ran even deeper than we'd initially uncovered. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Good luck today. Remember, this isn't about him. It's about building something better." She was right, of course. The purpose of today's review wasn't personal vindication, but professional accountability, establishing that Horizon's new security culture had no place for unauthorized access and hidden vulnerabilities, regardless of who created them. At 10 sharp, I entered the executive conference room where Richard and the review committee were already assembled. Nathan arrived moments later, his usually impeccable appearance showing subtle signs of strain, a slightly loosened tie, faint shadows beneath his eyes. He nodded curtly to the committee members before taking his seat across from me. Richard opened the proceedings with characteristic directness. This review has been called to address concerns about Director Parker's communications with clients regarding Horizon's security initiative, as well as his adherence to the new protocols implemented under CSO Parker's direction. For the next hour, the committee methodically reviewed evidence of Nathan's attempts to circumvent the security overhaul, emails to clients downplaying vulnerability concerns, meetings scheduled outside official channels, and implementation plans that preserved the appearance of security enhancement while maintaining the same fundamental weaknesses. Nathan defended his actions with practiced confidence. I've simply been offering clients options that balance security with practical business considerations. The comprehensive approach being implemented is admirable in theory, but creates unnecessary delays that risk client relationships. These aren't options, Director Parker, countered Vivian Zhao, legal counsel. They're direct contradictions of company policy and board-approved security measures. As the discussion continued, I waited for the right moment to address the most serious findings. When Richard finally asked if there were additional concerns to be presented, I nodded, pulling up the data Tyler had compiled. There's a more significant issue that came to light during our security remediation, I began, sharing the screens showing the backdoor access points and unauthorized external connections. We've discovered 17 undocumented access points in client systems, created during implementations managed by the Client Relations Department. The committee members leaned forward, expressions growing more serious as they absorbed the implications. More concerning than the existence of these backdoors is their usage pattern, I continued, displaying the log data. They show repeated access from external IP addresses, including 4 that trace directly to Director Parker's home network. This access occurred outside business hours and without client knowledge or authorization. Nathan's composed facade cracked visibly. That's absurd. I occasionally access client systems remotely for troubleshooting and monitoring. It's standard practice. Not through undocumented backdoors, it isn't, Vivian interjected sharply, and not without access logs or client authorization. What exactly were you accessing, Nathan? Richard asked, his tone deceptively mild. Performance metrics, implementation data, nothing sensitive or confidential, Nathan insisted. But the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his water betrayed his discomfort. I displayed the next screen, showing specific timestamps and access patterns. These logs show consistent access to client financial data, user authentication frameworks, and in several cases, proprietary algorithms that represent the intellectual property of our clients. The room fell silent as the committee processed this revelation. This wasn't merely bypassing security protocols, it was potential corporate espionage. I want to be absolutely clear, I stated, meeting Nathan's gaze directly. The issue isn't that you accessed these systems remotely. The issue is that you created undocumented backdoors specifically designed to bypass security monitoring, then accessed sensitive client data without authorization or legitimate business purpose. Nathan's expression hardened, his earlier uncertainty replaced by cold calculation. These accusations are completely unfounded, and frankly, suspect given our personal history. It was the card I'd been expecting him to play, suggesting my findings were motivated by personal vendetta rather than professional concern. But I'd anticipated this defense. That's why I've had these findings independently verified by 3 separate security analysts, none of whom were aware of our prior relationship, I replied calmly. Their assessments are included in the documentation provided to the committee. Additionally, all access logs and trace routes have been preserved, with chain of custody protocols for potential legal review. Richard cleared his throat. In light of these findings, This review will be expanded to include a full investigation of these unauthorized access points and their usage. Director Parker, you'll be placed on administrative leave pending completion of this investigation. Your system access will be suspended effective immediately. Nathan's composed veneer finally shattered completely. This is ridiculous. I built the client relations division from nothing. Those clients trust me, not some security-obsessed. That's enough, Nathan, Richard cut in firmly. Security isn't an obstacle to client trust. It's the foundation of it. The fact that you still don't understand that fundamental principle is precisely why this investigation is necessary. As the meeting concluded, Nathan stormed out without another word, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with the implications of what had been revealed. The committee members dispersed quietly, their expressions somber as they processed the potential ramifications for Horizon and its clients. Richard remained behind, shaking his head slowly. I didn't want to believe it could be this bad. Neither did I admitted. But the evidence is unambiguous. You handled that professionally, he noted. It would have been easy to make this personal, given your history. That wouldn't serve Horizon or our clients, I replied simply. This isn't about Nathan and me. It's about establishing a security culture where this kind of breach can't happen again, regardless of who's involved. Back in my office, I found Grace waiting with an update. Security has already implemented the access restrictions for Director Parker, she reported, and his team has been briefed that he's on administrative leave pending an investigation. How did they react? Mixed responses. Some seemed concerned, others almost relieved. She hesitated briefly. Olivia Wilson asked to speak with you when you're available. I nodded, unsurprised. Send her in. Minutes later, Olivia entered, her usual poise notably absent. She sat without waiting to be invited, her expression a mixture of anxiety and resolution. It's worse than what was presented in the meeting, she said without preamble. Nathan hasn't just been accessing client data, he's been selling it. Though I'd suspected something of this nature, the blunt confirmation still hit hard. You have evidence of this? She nodded, placing a small flash drive on my desk. Emails, transfer confirmations, meeting recordings. I didn't understand what was happening at first. He said we were providing enhanced analytics services to select partners. It wasn't until the security overhaul began that I realized what those services actually entailed. Why come forward now? I asked, studying her carefully. Because I made the same mistake twice, she replied, meeting my gaze directly. I believed him when he said the money he spent on me came from his own accounts, not yours. I believed him when he said the data transfers were standard industry practice, not corporate espionage. I'm done being complicit in his deceptions. I picked up the flash drive, weighing both it and her words carefully. This will be included in the investigation. Your cooperation will be noted, but it doesn't erase your involvement. I know. She stood to leave, then paused. Emily, I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know I admire what you're building here. The security culture you're creating, it's what Horizon should have been all along. After she left, I secured the flash drive in the safe behind my desk, then called Richard to update him on this new development. His response was measured but resolute. The investigation would be expanded to include potential data theft and corporate espionage, with appropriate legal counsel engaged. The remainder of the day unfolded in a carefully managed sequence of actions, informing the security team of expanded monitoring protocols, notifying affected clients of potential data exposure, and implementing additional protective measures across vulnerable systems. Through it all, I maintained the professional focus that had become my hallmark at Horizon, though internally I was still processing the scope of Nathan's betrayal, not just of me, but of the entire company and its clients. By evening, the initial shockwaves had rippled through the organization. Nathan's absence was conspicuous. His corner office dark as employees worked late, implementing additional security measures in response to the day's revelations. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see small clusters of people engaged in intense discussion, processing the dramatic developments that had transformed their workplace in just over a week. Maya called as I was preparing to leave for the day. I just heard from Grace. Corporate espionage, Emily? That's several levels beyond what we anticipated. It's consistent with the pattern, I replied, gathering my things. Nathan's personal and professional ethics operated on the same principle. Rules don't apply if you don't get caught. How are you holding up? I considered the question as I looked out over the Seattle skyline, now illuminated against the darkening sky. I'm focused on the work, the investigation, the security remediation, the client protection strategies. That's what matters now. And personally, honestly, there's a certain clarity, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. The financial deception, the affair with Olivia. They were symptoms of something fundamental in Nathan's character that extended to every aspect of his life, including his professional ethics. After ending the call, I took one final walk through the Security Enhancement Center, where teams continued working on vulnerability remediation even as night fell. The energy was focused, determined, and fundamentally different from the frantic pace of Nathan's regime. This wasn't rushed implementation to meet artificial deadlines. It was careful, methodical protection built to last. Tyler looked up from his workstation as I approached. "We've closed the last of the backdoor access points," he reported, and implemented additional monitoring protocols for any similar attempts in the future. "Excellent work," I commended him. "You've built something important here, not just technical fixes, but a framework for ongoing protection." His expression brightened with pride. "It's what we always wanted to do. We just needed someone to authorize it." As I left the building, the night air crisp against my face, I reflected on how much had changed in just 10 days. The security transformation I'd envisioned was taking shape faster and more comprehensively than I'd anticipated, accelerated by the very resistance Nathan had mounted against it. His attempts to undermine the initiative had only revealed how desperately it was needed. The following morning brought fresh developments. The investigation into Nathan's unauthorized access had expanded overnight as the security team discovered additional backdoors in systems beyond the initially identified client accounts. The pattern was consistent: hidden access points, external connections from masked IP addresses, and targeted data extraction focused on proprietary information with potential market value. Richard convened an emergency board meeting to address these findings, with me providing a comprehensive briefing on the scope of the security breach and the remediation efforts underway. The boardroom atmosphere was tense but resolute as directors processed the implications for Horizon's reputation and client relationships. "The question isn't just what damage has been done," observed Elaine Takamoto, one of the more senior board members. "It's how we demonstrate to our clients that we've fundamentally changed the security culture that allowed this to happen." "That's precisely what the Transformation Initiative addresses," I explained, displaying metrics from the first 10 days of implementation. "We're not just fixing vulnerabilities. We're establishing new protocols, training procedures, and accountability, measures to prevent similar breaches in the future." "And what about Nathan?" asked another director. "Do we have sufficient evidence for legal action?" Richard nodded grimly. "The investigation has already produced documentation of data transfers to third parties, financial transactions corresponding to those transfers, and communication explicitly discussing the sale of client information. Our legal team is preparing appropriate actions." As the meeting concluded, the board unanimously approved expanded resources for the security transformation, recognizing that Horizon's future depended on rebuilding client trust through demonstrable security enhancement. What had begun as a necessary improvement had become an existential imperative for the company's survival. Back in my office, I found Grace waiting with an update that added another layer to the unfolding situation. Nathan attempted to access the building this morning, she reported. Security denied him entry per protocol, but he became confrontational, demanded to collect personal items from his office. Was he allowed in? No. Security explained that all personal effects would be inventoried and made available through appropriate channels, following standard procedure, for employees on administrative leave during active investigations. I nodded, unsurprised by Nathan's reaction. He had always considered himself exempt from the rules that governed others, a mindset that had contributed directly to the security crisis now facing Horizon. There's something else, Grace added. Several clients have requested meetings specifically with you. They want to discuss the security vulnerabilities and understand exactly how their data may have been compromised. Schedule them immediately, I instructed. Complete transparency is the only way forward. They deserve to know exactly what happened and what we're doing to protect them now. The client meetings filled my afternoon, each one following a similar pattern. Initial concern giving way to cautious appreciation for the candor with which I addressed the security breaches. These weren't easy conversations, but they were necessary for rebuilding the trust that Nathan's actions had damaged. We've been with Horizon for 5 years, noted the CTO of Westbrook Financial during our meeting. In all that time, we never received this level of security transparency from Nathan's team. Issues were always downplayed, vulnerabilities minimized. That approach ends now, I assured him. You'll have complete visibility into your security profile, vulnerability assessments, and remediation strategies. No more hidden risks, no more undocumented access points. By the end of the day, a new pattern had emerged in client responses. Initial alarm at the security breaches followed by growing confidence in the remediation approach. The very transparency that Nathan had avoided was becoming Horizon's strongest asset in rebuilding client relationships. As evening approached, I received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Diane Foster, my security mentor, arrived unannounced, her expression serious, as Grace showed her into my office. I came as soon as I heard, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Corporate espionage isn't a typical career evolution, even for someone with Nathan's ethical flexibility. You don't seem entirely surprised, I observed. Let's say I've had concerns about Horizon's security practices for some time. She glanced around my office appraisingly. But it appears things are changing under new leadership. Rapidly, I confirmed. Though the scope of the vulnerability was even greater than I initially assessed. Diane nodded thoughtfully. Security breaches usually are. What starts as cutting corners inevitably evolves into something more serious once the initial ethical boundaries are crossed. She leaned forward. I didn't just come to offer moral support, Emily. I came to propose a collaboration. She outlined her vision, using Horizon's security transformation as a case study for her advanced security ethics program, documenting the process of evolving from vulnerability to protection as a model for other organizations facing similar challenges. What you're building here isn't just a better security system for one company, she explained. It's a blueprint for cultural transformation that could benefit the entire industry. Companies everywhere are struggling with the same fundamental question. How do you build a security culture strong enough to withstand both external threats and internal compromises? The proposal was compelling, offering the opportunity to extend the impact of Horizon's transformation beyond its own clients and systems. By documenting the process, the methodologies, and the outcomes, we could create a framework for security evolution that others could adapt and implement. I'd need board approval, I noted, and client permission for any specific cases included in the study. Of course, everything properly anonymized and vetted through appropriate channels. Diane smiled slightly. I've always said security isn't just about technology. It's about people, culture, and integrity. You're proving that theory in real time. After she left, I remained in my office, watching as evening settled over Seattle, the city lights coming alive against the deepening blue of the sky. In just 10 days, Horizon had undergone a profound transformation, not just in its security systems, but in its fundamental approach to client protection. The company Nathan had shaped through fear and shortcuts was evolving into something stronger, more transparent, and ultimately more trustworthy. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Dinner tonight to celebrate the corporate espionage revelations?" That sounds weird, but you know what I mean. I smiled slightly, appreciating her attempt at levity amid the intensity of the situation. "Rain check? Still processing everything." "Understood. But remember, it's okay to acknowledge this as a victory, not over Nathan specifically, but for security integrity generally." She had a point. While I'd maintained professional focus throughout the investigation and remediation process, there was undeniable personal significance in what had transpired. The very qualities Nathan had dismissed, my caution, my attention to detail, my insistence on proper procedure, had proven to be exactly what Horizon needed. The next morning brought news that shifted the situation into its next phase. Nathan had been officially terminated following emergency board action based on preliminary investigation findings. His company access had been permanently revoked, his responsibilities reassigned, and legal proceedings initiated regarding the data theft and corporate espionage allegations. Richard delivered the update personally, his expression somber despite the decisive action. "The evidence was overwhelming, Emily. The board voted unanimously after reviewing the documentation you provided." I nodded, processing this development. "Have clients been notified?" "We're handling that today, with your security team providing detailed briefings on the specific vulnerabilities affecting each client system." He studied me carefully. "You seem remarkably composed given the circumstances." "This isn't about personal vindication," I replied, though we both knew there was an element of that present. "It's about establishing accountability and moving forward with the security transformation Horizon needs." "Well, the transformation is certainly proceeding at remarkable speed." Richard smiled slightly. "The board has approved Dr. Foster's case study proposal, by the way. They see significant value in documenting this evolution for broader industry benefit." As the day progressed, the reality of Nathan's permanent departure settled across the company. Employees who had worked under his leadership for years processed the news with reactions ranging from shock to relief, while the security team continued their methodical implementation of enhanced protection protocols. Olivia appeared at my door mid-afternoon, her expression more settled than it had been since my arrival at Horizon. "I've been reassigned to the compliance division," she informed me. Grace thought my first-hand knowledge of how security protocols were circumvented could be valuable in developing prevention strategies. "A good use of your experience," I agreed, noting the absence of the Cartier bracelet that had once been a constant accessory. "How are you adapting to all the changes?" "It's clarifying," she replied after a moment's consideration. "Working with the security team, understanding the real impact of what we did. It's forced me to confront patterns I've been part of for too long, professionally and personally." There was something different in her demeanor, a groundedness that hadn't been present before, as if the dissolution of Nathan's influence had allowed something more authentic to emerge. "The Security Ethics Committee meets tomorrow to review your case," I reminded her. "Your continued cooperation has been noted in the assessment." She nodded. "I'm prepared for whatever they decide. Some consequences can't be avoided, and shouldn't be." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Emily, what you're building here is what I wish I'd been part of from the beginning. A company where integrity matters more than expedience." As she left, I turned back to the window, watching rain pattern against the glass as another Pacific Northwest storm rolled in. There was a certain symmetry to the weather, cleansing, renewing, washing away the accumulated debris of past decisions to make way for new growth. The security transformation that had begun just 10 days ago had evolved far beyond my initial vision, accelerated by the very resistance it had encountered. Nathan's attempts to undermine the initiative had only revealed how desperately it was needed, while his ethical compromises had illuminated the path toward a stronger, more transparent security culture. Outside my office, the security enhancement center hummed with purposeful activity, teams working collaboratively to implement protections that would safeguard client data far into the future. The atmosphere was focused but light, professional purpose without the fear that had characterized Nathan's leadership. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Foster. Initial framework for the case study is ready when you are. What you're building at Horizon has potential to become the new standard for security transformation. The woman Nathan had dismissed as too cautious was now leading an industry-recognized security revolution. The qualities he had mocked, thoroughness, attention to detail, ethical consistency, had become the foundation for rebuilding what his corner-cutting had compromised. As evening approached, I took a final walk through the office before heading home. The transformation was visible everywhere, in the collaborative energy of the security teams, in the transparency of the client communication protocols, in the relieved expressions of employees no longer forced to compromise their professional integrity for expedience. Tyler approached as I was gathering my things to leave. We've completed the comprehensive vulnerability assessment for all client systems, he reported. The remediation roadmap is ready for your review tomorrow morning. Excellent work. I commended him. You've built something remarkable here in a very short time. He smiled, confidence replacing the nervousness that had characterized our early interactions. We had the right leadership. That makes all the difference. As I left the building, stepping into the gentle Seattle rain, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just 6 months. The devastating night of discovery that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, the first step toward building something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more successful than what had been lost. Nathan had been right about one thing. The financial betrayal and public humiliation had changed me fundamentally, but not in the way he had predicted. Instead of breaking me, it had revealed strengths I hadn't fully recognized: resilience, clarity of purpose, and the capacity to transform painful experience into positive change. The security revolution now underway at Horizon wasn't just a professional triumph. It was proof that even the deepest betrayals could become the foundation for something remarkable. The cautious woman Nathan had dismissed had become precisely the leader Horizon needed to rebuild from the vulnerabilities his shortcuts had created. As I drove home through the rain-slicked streets, Seattle's skyline glimmering through the mist, I felt a sense of hard-won peace. The transformation was just beginning, but its direction was clear and its momentum unstoppable. What had started as one woman's response to personal betrayal had evolved into a company-wide revolution in security culture, one that would protect countless clients and potentially influence an entire industry's approach to vulnerability management. Sometimes, I reflected, the most profound strength emerges not despite our wounds, but directly because of them, and the wisdom they force us to develop. 3 months after my arrival at Horizon Digital Solutions, I stood at the podium during the Northwest Tech Innovation Conference surveying the packed auditorium. Technology leaders from across the region had gathered for my keynote presentation, Transforming Corporate Security Culture, the Horizon Case Study. The journey that had begun with personal betrayal had evolved into something far more significant than I could have imagined that devastating night in my kitchen. Security isn't just about technology, I began, my voice steady and confident. It's about people, culture, and the values that drive decision-making throughout an organization. When we compromise on security for convenience or expedience, we create vulnerabilities that extend far beyond our technical systems. The audience listened intently as I outlined Horizon's transformation, from a company where security had been treated as an obstacle to be circumvented to one where protection And integrity formed the foundation of every client relationship. I carefully avoided mentioning Nathan by name, focusing instead on the systemic issues his leadership had created and the methodical approach we'd taken to address them. The results speak for themselves, I concluded, displaying the final metrics. Slide. Client retention improved by 94%, system breach attempts reduced by 87%, and perhaps most tellingly, employee satisfaction scores reached their highest levels in company history. When people are empowered to prioritize security and integrity over expedience, both performance and well-being improve dramatically. As applause filled the auditorium, I caught sight of Richard and the Horizon board members seated in the front row, their expressions reflecting well-deserved pride in what we'd accomplished together. Behind them sat my security team, led by Tyler, whose transformation from hesitant analyst to confident security leader mirrored Horizon's broader evolution. The Q&A session that followed was engaging and substantive, with industry leaders seeking insights they could apply in their own organizations. The final question came from a woman in the back row, her expression thoughtful as she stood. "Your presentation focuses on professional outcomes," she noted. "But transformations like these often stem from personal insights as well. What motivated you to drive this particular change with such determination?" The question hung in the air, inviting a vulnerability I'd carefully avoided in my professional persona at Horizon. But standing there, addressing an audience of peers who were seeking authentic guidance, I recognized that the personal dimension of my journey held value for others. 3 years ago, I began, choosing my words carefully, I experienced a profound betrayal of trust in my personal life. Someone I believed in completely had been systematically creating vulnerabilities I couldn't see, hiding risks I didn't know existed. I paused, feeling the audience lean in slightly. When the deception was finally revealed, I had 2 choices: become permanently risk-averse, or transform that painful experience into deeper understanding of how trust is built, maintained, and sometimes exploited. I glanced at my team, seeing Maya and Dr. Foster among them, both nodding encouragingly. What I discovered was that the same principles apply whether we're protecting our personal boundaries or enterprise data systems. Transparency builds trust, integrity creates security, and the quickest path often creates the greatest vulnerability. The leader who prioritizes expedience over protection eventually compromises both. The woman who had asked the question nodded, seemingly satisfied with an answer that offered professional insight while respecting personal boundaries. As the session concluded, attendees approached with business cards and follow-up questions, many sharing their own experiences with security culture transformations. Dr. Foster joined me as the crowd thinned, her expression pleased. "You've come a long way from that first meeting in my office," she observed. "The case study is already changing how companies approach security culture. 3 major firms have implemented variations of your framework, and the early results are promising. It's validating to see the methodology work in different environments," I acknowledged, "though I suspect each company will face unique resistance points. Of course, transformation is never frictionless, especially when it challenges established power structures." She studied me thoughtfully. "Are you ready for the panel discussion tomorrow? Nathan's attorney will be participating." The industry panel on ethics in corporate security had become somewhat controversial when the organizers included legal representation for Nathan, whose case had become a cautionary tale in Seattle's tech community. His attorney had been publicly framing the situation as a witch hunt driven by personal vendettas, attempting to recast corporate espionage as routine industry practice. "I'm prepared," I assured her. "This isn't about Nathan or our personal history. It's about establishing clear ethical standards for the industry. His actions provide a valuable case study, regardless of how his legal team attempts to reframe them." The conference reception that evening brought together Seattle's technology elite, creating an interesting dynamic as I circulated among people who had known both Nathan and me during our marriage. Many approached with congratulations on Horizon's transformation and my keynote address, while others observed from a distance, perhaps still processing the dramatic shift in professional standing that had occurred between us. Maya appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "You're the talk of the conference," she noted, gesturing subtly toward a group of venture capitalists huddled in conversation across the room. "Word is they're considering making enhanced security culture a condition for future tech investments. Your presentation made quite an impression." "That would be a meaningful industry shift," I acknowledged. "Security as a funding prerequisite rather than an afterthought." "Speaking of meaningful shifts," Maya said more quietly, "Olivia just arrived. Looks like the compliance department was invited to represent Horizon's cultural transformation." I turned slightly, spotting Olivia near the entrance with several colleagues from Horizon's newly expanded compliance team. Her role had evolved significantly during the security transformation, her first-hand knowledge of how protocols had been circumvented proving valuable in developing more effective safeguards. The Security Ethics Committee had ultimately decided on a probationary period rather than termination, acknowledging her cooperation while establishing clear accountability for past actions. Over the past 3 months, she had become an unexpectedly effective advocate for transparent security practices. "I should say hello," I decided, making my way through the crowd toward the Horizon contingent. Olivia noticed my approach, her expression shifting from professional composure to something more complex. Respect mingled with lingering discomfort at our complicated history. "Congratulations on the keynote," she offered as I joined their group. The team watched from the compliance department. "Your explanation of how security culture affects every aspect of client relationships was particularly insightful." "Thank you." The compliance perspective has been invaluable in developing that integrated approach. I turned to include her colleagues in the conversation. "Olivia's contributions to our vulnerability assessment process have significantly improved our prevention frameworks." The professional acknowledgement seemed to ease some of the tension between us. We weren't friends, the history was too complex for that. But we had found a productive working relationship built on shared commitment to Horizon's transformation. As the evening progressed, I connected with technology leaders from across the region, many eager to discuss how Horizon's security transformation might be adapted for their own organizations. What had begun as one company's response to specific vulnerabilities was evolving into a potential industry standard for security culture development. Richard joined me as I was speaking with the CEO of a prominent financial technology firm. "Your keynote has generated significant interest in our approach," he noted after the CEO departed. "We've received 6 partnership inquiries already, all specifically mentioning the security culture framework you outlined." "That's encouraging. The methodology works best when adapted thoughtfully for different organizational contexts." Richard nodded, then lowered his voice slightly. "There's something else you should know. The legal proceedings against Nathan have taken an unexpected turn. His attorney has approached us about a potential settlement." This was surprising news. Nathan had been maintaining a defiant public stance, his legal team consistently characterizing Horizon's allegations as exaggerated and vindictive. "What changed?" I asked. "Apparently, evidence emerged that he had been engaging in similar activities before joining Horizon," Richard explained. "Previous employers were preparing to file their own charges once our case became public. His attorney is now seeking to consolidate everything into a single settlement with a non-disclosure agreement." The implication was clear. Nathan's pattern of ethical compromises extended further back than anyone had realized. What we had uncovered at Horizon wasn't an anomaly. It was consistent with a long-established approach to business that prioritized personal gain over client protection. "What's the board's position?" "We're considering the proposal, but with significant conditions. Any settlement would need to acknowledge the security violations and include restitution for affected clients. Richard's expression remained professional, but I detected a hint of satisfaction. His legal team seems increasingly eager to keep the full scope of his activities from becoming public record. As the reception wound down, I found myself on the outdoor terrace, looking out over Elliott Bay where fairy lights traced pathways across the dark water. The cool evening air carried the scent of salt water and the distant sound of maritime horns, sensory elements of Seattle that had once represented the fresh start Nathan and I had supposedly sought together when we relocated. Dr. Foster joined me at the railing, her expression contemplative. "Quite a journey from victim to industry leader," she observed. "When you first came to my office, did you imagine this outcome?" I considered the question, watching a ferry's lights grow smaller as it moved toward distant islands. I knew I wanted to transform what happened into something constructive. But no, I couldn't have envisioned this specific path. The most meaningful transformations rarely follow predictable trajectories, she noted. It's the unexpected turns that often lead to the most significant growth. The following morning brought the panel discussion on ethics in corporate security, featuring representatives from various perspectives within the industry. I took my place on the stage alongside Dr. Foster, the chief security officer from a major healthcare system, and Jonathan Mercer, Nathan's attorney, whose carefully crafted public statements had been attempting to reframe corporate espionage as routine business practice. The moderator, a respected technology journalist, opened with a deliberately provocative question. Where is the line between competitive intelligence gathering and corporate espionage, and who gets to draw that line? Dr. Foster responded first, establishing the ethical framework that would guide the discussion. The line isn't actually ambiguous, she stated firmly. Unauthorized access to protected systems, extraction of proprietary data, and sale of that. Information to third parties clearly crosses established legal and ethical boundaries. The real question is why organizations sometimes tolerate or implicitly encourage such boundary violations. Jonathan Mercer shifted uncomfortably before offering his perspective. The technology industry operates in gray areas by necessity, he countered. What some characterize as unauthorized access, others might view as proactive problem-solving or competitive research. Context matters tremendously in these evaluations. When my turn came, I addressed the framing directly. Security isn't a gray area, though those who benefit from vulnerabilities often try to present it that way. When we create backdoor access points specifically designed to circumvent security monitoring, that's not proactive problem-solving. It's deliberate exploitation. When we extract client data without authorization and sell it to competitors, that's not competitive research, it's theft. The discussion grew increasingly pointed as Mercer attempted to maintain the narrative of industry ambiguity, while the rest of the panel systematically dismantled it with specific examples and clear ethical frameworks. The attempt to characterize security violations as standard practice does a disservice to the thousands of technology professionals who maintain ethical boundaries every day, I noted during a particularly tense exchange. Most people in this industry don't create unauthorized access points, don't extract client data for personal gain, and don't compromise security for convenience. Suggesting otherwise isn't just inaccurate, it's an insult to the integrity that actually does exist throughout the sector. By the panel's conclusion, Mercer's position had been effectively marginalized, the audience clearly responding to the ethical clarity offered by the security professionals on the panel. As we left the stage, he approached me directly for the first time. "Ms. Parker?" he began stiffly. "My client has authorized me to inform you that he's willing to include a personal apology as part of the settlement negotiations." The offer was unexpected and revealing. Nathan had maintained a stance of indignant denial throughout the proceedings, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing either professionally or personally. "The apology should go to the clients whose data was compromised," I replied evenly. My focus is on ensuring they receive appropriate remediation and protection going forward. Mercer nodded, seeming unsurprised by my response. I'll convey your position, though I suspect this matter would be resolved more expeditiously if personal considerations were taken into account. This isn't personal, Mr. Mercer. That's precisely the point we've been making throughout the panel. Security ethics exist independently of individual relationships or histories. The violation of client trust would be equally serious, regardless of who discovered or addressed it. As he walked away, I felt a sense of genuine closure that had eluded me until that moment. The transformation that had begun 6 months ago in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of Nathan's betrayal, had evolved into something far more significant than personal vindication. It had become about establishing standards, protecting vulnerable systems, and creating a security culture that would benefit countless people beyond my immediate circle. The conference concluded with a leadership roundtable where executives discussed practical approaches to security culture development. The interest in Horizon's transformation methodology had grown throughout the event, with numerous companies expressing interest in adapting our framework for their own environments. You've created something remarkable, Richard commented as we prepared to return to Horizon after the final session. Not just a more secure company, but a model that others can follow. The board is discussing expanding our consulting division to help other organizations implement similar transformations. That would be a meaningful extension of what we've built, I acknowledged. Security culture isn't proprietary. The more widely these practices spread, the better protected everyone becomes. Back at Horizon the following Monday, the impact of the conference was immediately evident. The security team had returned energized by the industry recognition, while requests for information about our transformation methodology had flooded in from companies across the region. Tyler approached my office mid-morning, tablet in hand. The final client security upgrades are complete, he reported proudly. Every system has been enhanced, every vulnerability addressed, and every backdoor eliminated. We've also implemented the continuous monitoring framework to prevent similar issues in the future. Excellent work, I commended him. This represents a complete transformation of Horizon's security posture in just 3 months. The team wanted you to know something else, he added, his expression sincere. Working on this transformation hasn't just changed Horizon's systems, it's changed how many of us think about our professional responsibility. Seeing you stand firm on security principles, even when it meant confronting difficult truths, it's inspired a different approach to our work. His words resonated deeply, highlighting the ripple effects that extended beyond technical systems to the human elements of security culture. The transformation that had begun as a response to betrayal had evolved into a model for professional integrity that was influencing how dozens of technology professionals approached their responsibilities. Later that afternoon, Grace appeared with an update on the legal proceedings. The settlement has been finalized, she reported. Nathan has agreed to all conditions, including client restitution and non-competition clauses that prevent him from working in security-adjacent fields for 5 years. And the non-disclosure provisions? Limited to specific technical details that might create additional vulnerabilities if made public, the general nature of the security violations and the remediation approach will remain available for the case study and industry education. I nodded, satisfied with this resolution. The purpose had never been to destroy Nathan personally, but to address the vulnerabilities he had created and establish accountability for the ethical breaches that had compromised client security. As the day drew to a close, I took a moment to stand by my office windows, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and rose. 6 months ago, I had stood in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of personal betrayal, feeling as though my carefully constructed world had collapsed irreparably. Now I stood in my office at Horizon, surrounded by evidence of professional transformation, watching as the security culture we had built together rippled outward to influence an entire industry. Maya's text message captured it perfectly. From financial victim to security revolutionary in 6 months. Not a bad redemption arc, Em. The journey had been unexpected in every way, transforming profound hurt into meaningful purpose, personal betrayal into professional insight, and individual resilience into organizational strength. Nathan had been right about one thing the night he left our marriage. I had changed fundamentally, but not in the way he had predicted. Instead of breaking under the weight of his betrayal, I had discovered strengths I hadn't fully recognized. The courage to confront uncomfortable truths, the resilience to rebuild from devastation, and the vision to transform painful experience into positive change. The qualities he had dismissed as weaknesses, caution, thoroughness, ethical consistency, had become the foundation for a security revolution that was now extending far beyond Horizon's walls. As evening settled over the city, I gathered my things to leave, nodding to the security team still working diligently in the enhancement center. The transformation was well established now, the new protocols integrated into everyday operations, the culture of transparency and protection becoming simply how Horizon conducted business. Olivia passed me in the hallway, nodding respectfully as she headed toward a compliance team meeting. Her own journey of accountability and redemption had become an unexpected component of Horizon's transformation story, proof that ethical recalibration was possible when people took genuine responsibility for past actions. Outside, the gentle Seattle rain created shimmering patterns on the pavement as I walked to my car. The woman Nathan had dismissed as too cautious was now leading an industry-recognized security revolution. The betrayal he had thought would destroy me had instead revealed strengths that had transformed not just my life, but an entire corporate culture. As I drove home through the rain-washed streets, Seattle's lights reflecting in puddles and wet pavement, I felt a sense of completion that transcended personal vindication. The security transformation that had begun in response to betrayal had evolved into something far more significant. A model for how vulnerability could be transformed into protection, how painful experience could become valuable insight, and how the very qualities that might be dismissed as weaknesses in one context could become extraordinary strengths in another. The journey from that devastating night in my kitchen to the podium at the Northwest Tech Innovation Conference hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required confronting painful truths, rebuilding from fundamental betrayal, and transforming personal hurt into professional purpose. But the result, a security culture built on transparency, integrity, and genuine protection, was worth every challenging step of that unexpected path. Sometimes I reflected as Seattle's skyline receded in my rearview mirror, our greatest strengths emerge not despite our deepest wounds, but precisely because of them, and the wisdom we gain in healing them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.